Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another session of Tips in 20. I think I should call it Tips in 20-ish because looking back at the recordings, they tend 20 to 30 minutes. So lovely to have you live with us. And if you're watching on replay, equally, we hope you get loads of value. So I'm just going to share my screen very quickly as I introduce tonight's session. Go. So oops, the screen. It's marvelous. Great stuff. There we go. So we have got tips in 20, top tips and practical strategies on how to thrive in a life altered by your child's disability, diagnosis, or additional needs. Now, if you are new to Tips in 20 and you've not come across me before because you're watching this on a different channel at a different time, I am Charlie Beswick. I am the host of Tips in 20. I'm mum to Oliver and Harry. So this is Harry on the screen there. Harry was born with a condition called golden hair syndrome, a rare craniofacial condition. He is also autistic. Harry is neurodivergent too. Completely different ends of the spectrum, both incredible in their own right. I'm a teacher of over 16 years, best-selling author of a book called Our Altered Life, so do go and check that out. Mentor to mums just like me, whose lives have been altered by their children's disabilities, and I'm an advocate for parent carers in the workplace. I'm also a charity founder, and more on that later. So this evening, our topic is how to have, let me just see if I can clap that down, there we go, how to have healthy relationships or a healthy relationship when you parent neurodiverse children. Real challenge. And in the free Facebook community that I've got called Send Gin and Cheese, this comes up quite often, and there's lots of similarities in relationship struggles. So I thought there is nobody better to support us and help us through this, and the wonderful Rach Wilson, who is a relationship coach for couples specifically with neurodiverse kids. Rachel is joining us from Australia. It is 5:30 a.m. in the morning where she is. So Rachel, thank you. You are an absolute superstar. I'm really looking forward to this. Rachel's just going to talk with us, but if you've got questions, then you can either unmute or you can pop them in the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just put us onto speaker view and hand over to you if that's okay. I'll mute myself and yeah, fire away. We've got 25 minutes.
Oh, excellent. All that time in the world. We'll finally get some peace and quiet over here. Hi, my name's Rachel. I would have done the shower and the hair and the makeup thing, but it's 5:30 in the morning and it'll wake my kids up. My daughter's sleeping in the bed right next to me because that happens a lot. So not as professional. You've got me casual today. So let me tell you a little bit about my story so you know where I'm coming from and that I'm probably just like you in many ways. I have 4 children in total, but my little 2 are both neurodiverse. My son is 6. He's got an intellectual disability. We can't even tell you what his level of intelligence is because he won't participate in any tests. It just doesn't exist in his world. He's quite happy being him. He's also completely nonverbal. He's got IBS and a few other extra challenges on top of that. And then our little girl, Corey, our little fireball, she is also autistic. She has speech apraxia, and we have a lot of behavioural challenges with her. So things are full on here in the household of Wilson, but it is getting better. We had what we called Hell Year, which was 2020 to 2021. So the first year of COVID, while everybody was worried about COVID, we were just like not even concerned about COVID because Jackson was waking up every night screaming in absolute agony multiple times a night. We started to drive him around because the car was the best sensory environment for him. We had no idea what was causing the pains. We took it in turns. We took it in shifts. Hubby would do the first part of the night. I would do the second. The rule was when the second coffee gives out, you have to tap the other person in. So we literally lived on coffee. And I'm not a coffee drinker. I never drank coffee until that year. It was totally a survival thing. So for 12 months, we did this every night. We barely slept. We literally didn't sleep in the same bed at the same time because we're on different nighttime shifts. We were exhausted, beyond exhausted. I was so burnt out to the point that my brain was shutting down. I couldn't understand what people were saying. Brain fog was ridiculous. It was my energy levels, obviously, as you know, when you have sleep deprivation, extremely low. We became ships in the night. Our relationship suffered, and we've been together. We just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary this year. We were the couple that everyone said would last forever. The people, all of our friends looked up to us to have, this is the relationship to have. So our relationship was strong going into Hell Year. And we suffered, we struggled massively, because not only was our son having extreme problems, nighttime wise, as well as major meltdowns because of his overtiredness. Our daughter at the time was turned 1, and she started having these massive rages. So it would take me between 45 minutes and 2 hours to get her through to the other side of the rage, trying to stop her from hurting herself, trying to stop her from hitting, scratching, biting, going at me. And it just, if I wasn't out driving my son around to try and help him with his pain, I was trying to get my daughter through a rage. That was my life. I had a business at the time. I couldn't do it. Everything stopped. Yes.
Can I just double check that everybody else can hear okay? We've just had somebody say that we can't hear. Okay, so we've got a thumbs up.
Might need to go out and come back in again.
Yeah, I think just go out and come back in again. Sorry, carry on.
No, good. So yeah, for 12 months we were, in the stress of that, knowing you've got to go to all the doctors and the doctors don't know what's going on. I'll wait till you see a pediatrician, and doing all the things, like all the research you do to try and find solutions for your kids. Like, that was my life. And for the first time in our relationship, we really struggled. We were disconnected. We were snappy. We didn't have the patience, which you can understand when you're sleep deprived and you're stressed and you've physically got nothing. At the end of the day, nothing for each other, nothing for anything other than the absolute most you absolutely have to do, that you cannot get away from. Okay, the child needs food. I've got to get up and change that, but that's the level of survival we were at in that time. And I know everyone who's got a special needs child goes through that at some point. That Hell Year, Death Valley, everybody's got a name for it. So eventually we got solutions. Eventually things started to get better, and here we are 2 years on the other side of that. And there are still times that I have to sit down and take time out because the burnout gets to me. Hi. So what I want to share with you is, we are still together. We had to rebuild our relationship post Hell Year, because Hell Year had us literally in survival mode as individuals, as a couple, and as a family. And it's hard to do that connection thing. After a couple of conversations through that year, the come to Jesus kind of moments where it's like, hey, where are you? What's happening? What's going on? And we came to the same kind of conclusion that both of us were doing the same thing. And I remember this one particular conversation, because I was so tired, and he was just a zombie. He was just doing the thing, and he'd walk straight past me. And I remembered in that moment, it's like, well, what happened to honey? How you going? Or a touch on the shoulder, a cuddle, a kiss when I'm standing in the kitchen. What happened? None of that. He would just walk by me, and I was upset about it. And I was in the bedroom, and then eventually he came in, and I said to him, like, you're not even here. Like, where are you? You're not connecting. You're not talking to me. You're not giving me cuddles and kisses. He goes, well, do you realize you're not doing that either? I'm like, huh. Damn, you're right. I'm not. So we made a bit of a pact and said, okay, well, your sex wasn't happening. That was so far off the table. It was literally on the floor. It can't be seen. Sex life doesn't exist. So what can we do was kind of the question. And there were a couple of little things that had the most impact, that just helped us to get through that time until things got a little bit better, a little bit lighter, and a little bit more space for us to connect more. And these are the things that people don't realize the power of them. So first one is gratitude. Thank you. Like, your partner and you are in this together, even though there's going to be times it feels like you're not in it together. You're all on your own because they're stressed and over there and you're stressed and over here. It does feel extremely lonely, even though you're in the same house doing it together. But just a simple thing like going up to your partner and saying, thank you for everything that you do. I know it's tough. I know you're struggling, but thank you for being here with me. Or if they do put the dishes away, something they normally do on a regular basis as part of their contribution, thank you so much for doing that. Men in particular really respond to gratitude, appreciation, they value being seen, and it helps to give them more incentive or inspiration to bring it back to you. But even I find when my husband says to me, look, you're doing so great with the kids. Thank you for taking on such a big load of it, because I do part-time work and the kids is bulk load on me. And he does full-time work and then he jumps into the family mix at the end of the day. So, he'll say thank you to me. And even though it's something I'm doing, just hearing that little bit of gratitude, being seen for what I'm doing, the value I'm bringing, the load that I'm carrying, it builds a bridge between us. And that's what you're trying to do, is to do the little things that can build a bridge so you can stay connected through the storms until the storm can pass enough for you to connect more and you have more energy more to get there. So appreciation, it doesn't take long. You've just got to have a thought to go, thank you, and then build it. Not just thank you, but thank you for. And if you can add more to that, thank you for doing such and such. It means so much to me. Or it makes me feel secure, or it makes me feel loved, or it takes a load off of me and helps to relieve some of my stress. So thank you. So that helps. Another thing that my husband and I do is, I call it a presence moment. Like, we are so busy doing all the things for the kids, doing the things we have to do for the house, doing the things we have to do for work, that we don't always stop to just be with each other. And there's two ways this works for us. So he'll walk up to me and he'll put his hand on my heart and look me directly in the eyes. And what that does, that the second he puts his hand on my heart, everything in my body stops and looks directly at him. Now, I've got an ADHD brain. It goes a million miles an hour. I'm not always paying attention. But when he puts his hand on my heart, he brings me into the present moment to be with him. And it might only be one breath in and one breath out, looking at each other, just in that moment. It's enough. And the other way we do that is we close our eyes and we put our foreheads together. And we just stand there and breathe for a second or so. If we can hold on to that space for 5 seconds, maybe 10, it's just pure connection. There's no other reason to do it. It doesn't have a function of anything else. It's just, hey, I'm here. We're here. We're still together. I love you. And we'll, if we can, we'll say I love you, but sometimes it's literally just that moment where we just connect in that way. And it might be a different, it might work with you holding the heart, one hand on each other's heart and just looking each other in the eye for 10 seconds. It might work better for you to close your eyes and just forehead to forehead. It might be anything, whatever you can do to have just a moment of pure presence also helps to build that connection between you. So those two things, if you do nothing else, will start to bring and build a connection enough to just get you through. And then if you can, over and above that, chatting, even if it's only for 5 minutes, we would do a check-in. Hey baby, how are you really going? Knowing full well that either one of us is going to say, it's shit, it sucks, I hate it, I'm struggling. It doesn't matter. The whole point of it is to be really honest and to, as a partner, hold the space for your other half to just be real about how much they're struggling. You don't necessarily need to fix it. In often cases, you can't fix it because Your child's going through what they're going through. You're not getting the sleep. They have their needs. You've got no choice but to meet their needs. And that takes 95, 100, 110% of everything you've got. But if you can just, at the end of the day, do a check-in. Your partner should be your best friend. Check in with your best friend to go, hey, how are you doing? And as you being the receiving end of that, hearing that, be able to go, just let off some of the stuff that you hold on to because you have to, because you've got to go through to the next thing. Let it be a space where you can just download, offload, but it's not there meant to be a attack of the other person. So you might be struggling with your partner. We all do. And when you're at the end of your wit's end and you've got nothing in the barrel, it's easier to see all the things that your partner's doing wrong or not doing. Just remember they're also struggling usually, and they're not their best person, just like you're not your best person. Having some compassion helps. But there are going to be times where in that time where you want to download, you want to say to your partner, hey, I really struggled when you did blah, blah, blah. If you can try to, and I say try to have the awareness instead of pointing the finger at them and say, look, I really struggled when you said because I felt, as opposed to you did this and you made me feel. If you can not poke the bear, but you can be honest and say, look, I really struggled with that because the story in my head, and these are a couple of things that I'll talk more about in a minute when it comes to sharing stuff you're struggling with. But just being able to remember that the person who's offloading is offloading the emotional component, which is going to possibly be irrational, super sensitive, not a clear perspective, but it needs to be offloaded. It's a way of, like, you're in a pressure cooker when you've got kids like this. There is so much pressure, so much physical demand, so much you are trying to manage, and it is hard work. It is super hard work. And the reality is relationships in this kind of scenario, 70 to 80% of them don't last. So these are the little things you can do for each other and with each other that'll just help you to move forward. And that letting go of the steam helps to just take the load off and not be carrying around so much frustration, resentment, sadness, whatever's in there. It might even help you as you have that conversation to be able to find out what the other person's perspective is and then clear the air, which is what you want to do on a more regular basis. So check in with your partner is another way of both being supportive, but also a way of connecting. Sometimes you don't even know that your partner's struggling as much as they are until you have this check-in. So regular check-ins really do help. So to go further into when stuff goes sideways, then you've got things you need to talk about, particularly if your partner is pissing you off or done something really to hurt you, or it feels hurt to you. Everyone has got a different perspective and a different experience. You will never have the same experience. And while you think you know what's going on for the other person, you think you know what they're thinking, or you think you know their motivations, often cases you don't. So in a conflict resolution strategy, it's use I language. It's I felt when I saw or heard you say or do blah, blah, blah. The story in my head. Because when it comes like, this is what's happening in my head, and this is the perception I had, and this is the feelings that I had, gives the other person a chance to go, oh, that's not what I meant, or that's not what it was, or whatever. If you go up to him and go, you said blah, 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 and you made me, and blah. So I call it poke the bear. It doesn't really do you any good. Don't poke the bear. Pat the bear and just hold on to it for a second, but bring it back from I felt, I saw, because the story and I'm being ADHD. When I get overtaxed, I get oversensitive, and it skews the way that I see and perceive things because my emotions kick in. As soon as your emotion kicks in, it clouds the reality. But your emotions are valid. Let me tell you that right now, both of you. Whatever you're feeling is valid because your emotions are the outcome of what you saw, what you heard, what you perceived in your mind, and the story that you're telling yourself, whether it's true, right, or wrong. So whatever you're feeling is absolutely valid. What we want you to do in these scenarios is to get more information, get the other side of the story. And it might be that the other person goes, oh yeah, I did do that, and you have a valid reason for getting upset. I'm sorry I did that. It gives them an opportunity to not go full into defense, because that's what happens when you poke the bear. Just like when someone comes at you and said, you didn't do this and you should have done that. Look, I'm guilty. I still do it occasionally, but I try to pull myself back and then apologize for it and say, I'm sorry. So taking it on as an I language, taking it on as saying the story in my head is, that statement I got from Brene Brown, it's brilliant. It has saved so many arguments when we can both go, the story in my head is, okay, I hear you, and here's the other side. It helps to resolve things a lot faster. And when you're in a pressure cooker situation, you want techniques that are going to help you resolve things faster so you can get to the good stuff, and hugs and stuff. Look, they're kind of the main ones that are probably the most potent, that will be helpful in keeping you together through the storms, but even little things you can do to start rebuilding your relationship. So the thing you've got to remember is when you are in a storm, you get used to a pattern of behavior. You get used to operating separately. You get used to not talking. You get used to not checking in, not even thinking about the other person and wondering how they're going. Because when you're at the depths of burnout, you're not thinking about the other person at all. You're thinking about, oh God, what do I absolutely have to do next? There is nothing outside of the absolute next action you have to take. And if you can remember, if the other person is just as tired as you, then you're both in the same boat. You both don't have the capacity to think anything or be aware of anything outside of what's the absolute next thing I have to do. And it's usually for the kids. So when it starts to lighten up, it's almost, you have to retrain yourself to think and have awareness of the other person. And start to go, okay, well, what are some of the things, and this is a good thing to write down, what are some of the things we used to do when it was just us? What did we used to do? Because that's the benchmark that everybody is assessing themselves on when they're looking at their relationship. They're assessing in what it was when it was the best it ever was and where it is now. But the reality is, when you've got special needs kids, it'll never get back to that. It'll never get back to that. You have to find a new kind of normal, knowing that there are going to be phases through your life with these children that it is going to be survival. And you do the things to get through survival. And then once it gets more time, then you start to go, okay, well, hey, we can't do date night. We can't really do date night because night times it's too hard to get two people here to take care of the kids because they're a two-person team. But we could do an afternoon when it's easier, and my oldest daughter can take them for a couple of hours because the afternoon's not so bad. Night time's nightmare. So we have maybe once a month, we go for a couple of hours, we go for a coffee somewhere, we go for a walk on a beach. That's as good as it gets, but that's better than what we had. You know, we get that little bit of time. And if we can't squirrel out the time out of the house, we try and make time inside the house. So once the kids are down to bed, it might only be, hey, let's just snuggle on the couch and watch a TV show, which then I fall asleep. But at least we're cuddling. There's physical contact. Whereas in the depths of survival, that didn't even happen because we weren't even in the same space. He was in the car and I was in bed trying to get some sleep, unsuccessfully usually. So, but that's what it was. But as it lightens up, and you will have periods where it lightens up, what can we do? And if you've got an idea of what you used to do when it was just you two, it's like, well, how can I make something like that happen? It'll be different. Can we get away for a night? Can we organize a weekend away? Geez, wouldn't that be awesome? Oh my God. And sometimes it's actually the opposite. It's sending me away for a week to get downtime so that I can get actual recovery time, and him and someone else take over with the kids for a week. And then I make it so that he gets away for a week or a weekend so he can get some quality downtime, because we all need the downtime to recharge. So we've we've found a way to balance him and I getting our own time out of the mix, but then little things that we can do together where we get that time. And as time goes on, now the kids are just about both in primary school next year, and then right now their needs aren't as bad. The rages aren't happening so much. We've worked out solutions for that. Our son seems to be getting better. He's not as sick as he was last year. So we're adding in more time. Our sex life is not where it used to be, but we're actually having sex on a somewhat regular basis, more times this year than last year. So yay, yay for us. Yeah, so it's finding when the times start to get easier, it's consciously choosing to reconnect more, to do more of the little things, and to start incorporating some of the bigger things. Even if it's not sex, but we just lay in bed naked together, that's a start. Sometimes that's as far as it gets, and we snuggle and fall asleep naked. That's good. So hopefully that's been helpful. I'm here for any questions. I've got lots of other information in my head, but 20 minutes, I don't want to just download and give you
Thank
too
you,
much
Rach.
to go on.
No, thank you. That was really good. And definitely gave me things to think about with Andrew. And I would say we've got a really solid relationship. So, but even then, I'm like, yeah, I don't actually thank him enough for what he does for us as a family. Not daily. I assume he knows because we say, I love you all the time. I assume,
and that's the
he
problem.
knows. Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah.
we know when someone says to us, thank you, you've done an awesome job, or thank you for that, I really appreciate it. It's just a little thing that goes, oh,
yeah,
that's nice. And when you're with kids, you're constantly giving. So they don't give back as much.
So on that note, I've scribbled down a couple of questions here. So
excellent.
when you're having that conversation around showing gratitude, well, do you have the conversation or does it just happen naturally? If you have the conversation, then does it almost remove the sincerity from it? Or is it something that you need to say, look, we need to be thanking each other. Let's just be conscious together that we're going to do that. And the same for those moments of connection. Is that something that I know you mentioned your husband puts his hand on your heart. Is that something that he just did and you've kind of fallen into that flow? Or again, was there a conversation around that?
There's a bit of both. So there was a conversation to sort of start it to put it into our awareness to do more randomly.
Yeah.
Because unless you talk about it, it doesn't plant the seed. There's no opportunity for that to happen. And the hard part is we often have this, well, they should know. They should know to just thank me. They should know to just give me a hug sometimes. But, we've got to take that away from the equation because they might know, but hey, they're in this. They're struggling as much as you are, and they might be on the other side, which I found to be the case. He was thinking the same thing. Oh, I wish she would.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's a great conversation to have. What are you wishing I would do? What's in your head that you've been thinking but not saying? And then when you get that out, it's like, oh, okay, then you actually want more physical hugs. Like for him, because that was the conversation we had in that come to Jesus moment. It's all knowing that sex was way off the table. What can I do that would help you to feel loved? That I can do with this limited capacity, and what can he do? So my love language is chatting, like conversation, more than just how was your day, something about the weather, what about the kids, like that's that doesn't connect me. The conversations that connect me is when we, like the check-ins, I'm really struggling, I wish blah blah blah. Like if we're doing the real honest stuff, I'm connecting in that, even if it's crap stuff, it's connecting because it's real. So that for me, those little conversations, that check-in became part of what we did because that was my love language. Him is physical affection. So he said, look, if you just come up to me and just give me a hug out of the blue, which I used to do all the time, I'd stopped doing that. I'd stopped doing any kind of physical touch. And he was in deficit. Like when we're not doing those things, that's when you really start to feel very alone, even though they might be sitting or laying right next to you. So it was the physical touch that he was craving. So I'm like, okay, well, I promise that I will do my best to give you more physical touch, because my thing was, I don't want to give you the sexual physical touch because I don't want to lead you on knowing that I'm not got the energy to go there. He goes, actually, I know you don't have the energy to go there, but if you just a little bit of physical, sexual touch occasionally, that's enough for me. And if it goes any further, great, but I'm not going to expect it. I'm like, okay, if you take the expectation off, then I'm okay to do a little bit there too.
Okay.
So it was having these really honest conversations and being able to say, well, this is what I need in order to feel loved and connected to you, knowing full well that we weren't going to have these big, massive conversations. Okay. But if we could just have these snippets, or if I'd say to him, how are you really doing, that he would honestly answer me rather than going, I'm fine, because that was his default answer. There was no thought in it. It was just, I'm fine, because he was soldiering on.
And how do you cope if one of you is in survival mode and the other one isn't quite there? What if you're in different places?
There's going to be
practically.
There's always going to be times where that's the case, and it's usually been me in more survival mode. Men tend to do the physical aspect a lot easier than women. It's got to do with our hormones, actually. I found out that's why because our testosterone gives them the extra energy, whereas we don't have that level of testosterone, so our energy is reliant on our adrenals. And guess what? We burn out. That's why women tend to burn out more significantly and for longer than men do. They just need to get a good night's sleep and give them some food, give them some appreciation, and they've got more capacity on a physical front than women in general. Now, it's not always the case. Men do struggle with mental health, which can also be a massive factor.
Okay.
So when you've got them when you're in two different zones, it's almost like being able to recognize, oh, my partner is the one that's actually in survival mode. And it's having compassion and being the one that's almost like giving to them in that moment. They're in survival. Hey, you go give them appreciation. Honey, is there anything I can do for you right now? I know you're struggling. What do you need? How can I help you? Just something as simple as that. How can I help you in this moment? What can I do for you?
And how do you cope when you've got a partner? I don't know if this is a British thing, or whether it's a universal thing, but what do you do when you've got a partner that isn't into feelings, doesn't want to be talking about feelings, and you know that this is going to be a difficult conversation to even begin to broach, and they might be a bit like, oh, I don't do the soppy stuff, I don't want to have this conversation. If you're hitting a wall, what would your advice be about either getting the courage to start that conversation in the first place, or pursuing it if somebody's kind of closing you down a bit?
It is a hard one because the reality is we're humans, and there's a necessity for connection, and we all feel. Often people who don't want to deal with the feely stuff have got their own trauma around it, which is it's a thing. We all have trauma. It shows up differently. So it's particularly hard when you've got someone who's a feely person and a partner who isn't as such a feely person, which is my husband. So I try to deal with the feely stuff on my own for the most part, to go through in my head. Because I'm a coach, it gives me more skills in that respect, in that it's like, okay, what am I feeling? Okay, I'm feeling this. Why am I feeling that? Because then I ask myself, what is the story in my head? So that I can then kind of process some of that emotion myself, because the reality is what I'm thinking and feeling is possibly not based completely on reality. It's stuff that's my own trauma that it's building, and I need to process that. It's not his responsibility to, what's the word? Quell my emotions.
Okay.
But what I do need is someone who can be supportive while I go through it at times. So if he knows that it's not directed at him, and that I just need him to hold the space for me to verbalize, to process the emotion, that seems to go over a lot easier.
Okay, perfect.
He's more willing to do that than he is to think he's going into one of those conversations where all my emotion is going to spill out onto him and it's going to be an attack on him. And sometimes it does end up like that because I've got no control over it, and because I'm so low capacity. And so that becomes a trouble zone. So we do end up in those hard conversations, but in that, I end up coaching us through that, because I'm the one with the higher emotional intelligence and ability to do that.
Okay. Two left from me, and then we'll head over to everybody else if they've got any.
Yep.
One question is, what do you do if the connection between the couple is good, but the connection
Yep.
between the children isn't. So either
Yep.
one parent is struggling and more so than the other one with the kids, and that's becoming the sticking point. So the couple are solid, but they've got these children and one parent is really struggling with the kids, and that's becoming an issue. What do you do there?
Well, this is where you've got to get into a team mentality. My teammate is struggling. What is it specifically are they struggling with? Is there anything I can do differently that will help with that particular relationship? So our daughter is behaviorally challenging, extremely behaviorally challenging. My husband doesn't have the same level of capacity for compassion with her that I do. So I tend to take on the load of her, leaving the load of Jackson to him. So we've split it up that way because I've got the skills to deal with her and he's got the physicality to deal with Jackson. The downside to that is he's got a better relationship with Jackson and I've got a better relationship with Corey. But when you're in a burnout scenario or a survival scenario, that is a survival tactic. It just limits the stress and the load on the person who struggles with that particular child for whatever that is. But in the times where it's not a struggle, it's almost like an education piece. It's like, okay, here's how you get around her. Here's what works for me. Here's here's what you need to know about the struggles, because often there's one parent that knows that child more,
Okay.
or has different experiences with that child. But the reality is, even when you've got children that don't have special needs, there is always a child that the parent clashes with. Like, you just, on a personality level, you just don't get them. So just remember that that's often the case. It can be a clash of personalities because they're so alike or they're so different, is usually the case. So be compassionate with each other, but think about your partner as a teammate. They're part of the team. How can we use our strengths to help each other? How can I help you as my teammate to get around this problem with this child? Or let's brainstorm it together. What can we try? What can we do differently? Like with my teenager, my husband's getting along better with her at the moment because I'm the one that's constantly nagging her for stuff. So they're having fun. I'm being mum. So the solution is we need to switch that. Let him nag her for a little bit, and her and I go and have some fun. It's looking at what's happening that's causing the problem. What are the things that you both know that you can change? How can you help each other to build a better relationship with that child, or come up with different strategies?
Okay, lovely. And my last question is, how do you deal with resentment when, let's say, you're the stay-at-home parent and you're quite resentful of the fact that you've had to lose your career, or you're always the one dealing with the paperwork and the admin and the appointments, or vice versa, you're the parent that goes out to work and resents the fact that you haven't got the ability to stay at home with your children, and there's an assumption that you're having downtime at work when actually you're still worrying about everybody, the pressure's on you for the income. So that resentment between I'm assuming you're going to say communication.
Oh, it's
key. But it can be huge, that resentment.
It's huge and it's real. Let me just say that it is real. I've definitely experienced it. My husband's definitely experienced it. You're not out of the realm of reality when you describe those two completely different scenarios. And it does come down to, and it's sometimes when we're in our resentment, we're looking at the green grass on the other side. And I can tell you now, there is no green grass on the other side. There is none. You guys are in a hard situation. Your kids have got high demands and high needs, and you are one human, and there is only so much you can do, and only so much you can juggle with, and only so much time and energy you've got for everything. And the relationship in reality is the first thing that really suffers, because you've got to do the work. You've got to take care of the children. And somewhere in there, you're supposed to do this self-care thing.
Oh, yeah,
that's hilarious. But we try as humans to do it all, but we can't. And if we can remember in those moments that we can't do it all just as much as our partner can't do it all, and if you're feeling resentment, it is a good time to have a conversation and say, look, this is how I'm feeling. Because the story in my head is when you go to work, you're getting time out. And it's, if we're having that kind of conversation and you're sharing resentments, the best antidote to that is to say, I hear you. I can see why you would feel that. We just need acknowledgement that our perception, our feeling is valid. If you can validate your partner and how they feel, you will dissolve a lot of the angst. They come at you and say, I'm frustrated, I'm angry at you because, yep, I can understand why you're angry. It's very valid to feel angry right now.
Okay.
Because it's not just that your partner's going to work or that your partner gets to stay home. It's, I'm stressed because I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm not getting my needs met, I'm not having any fun, we're not connecting. That's what's actually happening underneath that. The resentment is only because that's not happening.
Amazing.
It's just a symptom of both people struggling with their load. So validate it. And then when you get to the other side of each person expressing, well, this is what it's like on this side of the fence, this is what I'm struggling with, then it's, okay, what can we do? What can I do to help you? What can you do to help me? How can we feel like we're back in a team together on this? Because you are in this together, but you want to feel like you're part of a team, not over on separate islands, feeling like you've got the bulk of the load.
Okay, that's such a good answer. Thank you. So I am going to, she says, there we go, just very quickly mention that if you want to see more of Rach and her brilliance, she will be appearing in our membership for a longer session, so a little bit more specific Q&As. So our membership, the information's there on the screen. I'm not going to read it to you because you can have the replay, but there's a few points there about the membership is for you if. There's a few points there around what's included. So you get guest experts, just like Rach, you get mental calls with me, you get some work on emotional pathway, time, advocacy pathway, and time and space for yourself. So really nailing those 3 pillars so that you're all really well equipped for anything else that gets thrown at you. And what that will enable you to do moving forward. So there's loads of information there. So pause this if you're watching it on replay, have a good read. Join today. So this costs less than 50p a day for an expert speaker like Rach. And sometimes we've got 2 a month coming in. So we've got some incredible speakers and some fantastic experts coming, which paying privately would cost you an arm and a leg. So it's either £150 for the year, £12.99 for the month, and head to sendginandcheese.org for full information and to sign up. So really, just to end, I just wondered if anybody's got any burning questions. We have run over a bit just because you've been so fantastic. So does anybody have any questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can unmute and shout them up. As I say, Rach will be joining us in the membership as well for a bit of a longer session. So any comments, feedback, or questions at all?
Was that helpful? I'd love some feedback.
It was so helpful. It was so helpful. I love Brené Brown, and I've heard the story I tell myself in my head before, but I'd completely forgotten about it until that. And I just think it's such a beautiful opener, because you're not saying, as you say, you're not blaming anybody or attacking somebody, but at the same time, you're not taking ownership for it. It's kind of just, this is what's going on in my head, rightly or wrongly. This is what I'm seeing. This is the picture I'm seeing. What's yours? It's like two people go to the cinema and they watch the same film, and one comes out and goes, God, that was brilliant, and the other one says, are you joking? It was crap. And it's just, we see things through our own experience, don't we? So I love that very much. I don't think we've got any questions, but to be honest, you've answered everything that I'd looked through the groups. You've pretty much covered everything that was in there anyway. So we've got such great advice, thank you. Could relate to so much about being in survival. So being in that survival mode. So yeah, we've got just love
Part
it.
of the send life, really. It's just, you go in and out of survival. And if you can just remember some of these tips just to get you through survival and then focus on the relationship, then you will get through. But it does take choosing to focus on the relationship for it to grow. It's like, think about, the focus is the fuel. Focus is the water and the nutrition that you would give yourself or a plant. If you don't give it focus, then it does wither away and slowly die. But anywhere you can give it some kind of energy will give it more life.
Brilliant. And if people want to find out more about you and your work, Rach, how can they get in touch or find out more?
Yeah, my website is divinerelating.com. I've got a little guide there that you can grab. You can put your email address in, and some of it I've covered today. There's other stuff in there. Just how to survive, relationship survival guide for couples who've got neurodiverse kids. But you can jump on there and you can email me at rach@divinerelating.com if you want to have a personal chat. That's no problem. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Fantastic, thank you. Just very quickly, it's so hard to be open and honest as defensive.
Sorry.
That's okay, don't worry. It's so hard to be open and honest as defences experience huge emotions, and then defences come into play, and sometimes saying nothing keeps things ticking over.
Yeah, but saying nothing, and it just holds onto that emotion, and what that does is it builds. It gains momentum, it gains intensity. So if you don't clear the air at some point, then the next little thing they do, you get all of that emotion and more.
Yeah.
Which is the problem with trauma. Is unhealed trauma does that in general, and then over time that becomes a very easily ignited and extreme emotional response. So yes, it's hard, but if you can do more clearing of the air for that to go through, then you're in a better place to not have those explosions.
And I guess
forward.
really both options are hard, aren't they? It's like, pick your hard. It's hard to be quiet and to sit on your emotions. And yes, it's hard to have those conversations. There's no easy path.
There's no easy. No.
One will lead to better outcomes, won't it, ultimately?
Yeah. And someone else had a question. I can't. It comes up as John Douglas, but I'm assuming you're not John.
Okay, it's not come through on mine. So.
This is John. I'm
Hi,
Lindsay.
John. Hi, Lindsay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. So, what about if you're in a situation where resentment is built on both sides so long that you can't seem to have a conversation without it getting really heated because you've got so much pent up resentment? How do you strip that right back and get to a point where you're discussing things calmly?
Great question.
It is a great question. There's no easy answer to that. Resentment is, like I said, it's a symptom of needs not being met. That's our emotional red flag that goes, my needs have not been met. And to pull it back is going to be to have very honest conversations and letting both people have a chance to express their resentment. But if they can express it in a way that says, I'm resentful because these are my needs that are not being met. This is what I need. And together as a team working on how can we get those needs met, knowing that when you've got special needs kids, you don't have full capacity, you don't have full time, you don't have full energy, and those needs probably will not be fully met at this stage. It's a process, but if you can, the problem with resentment is it fuels the emotional component, and it comes out in a toxic way. And it's the toxicity that becomes the trigger for the defensiveness, because it feels like an attack. So if there's built up resentment, and the both of you can go, okay, we need to have a conversation about this, we need to express our resentment, then it's like I said, the story in my head is, I'm resentful because blah. If you can know that this is an opportunity to vent the resentment as the person who is the non-speaker, in your head, you've got to go, this is just their emotional content. It's not necessarily the reality, but it's how they feel. And it needs to be expressed if you're going to have any chance of being able to get beyond it.
Because
See, I find that interesting, right?
Yes.
Because I have stopped being grateful. Because whenever I express gratitude, I will say, for example, thank you for this morning, love. That was really great. I loved it. It was brilliant. I had some time to do the things I needed to do. I got to do this. I got to do that. It was great. But then 12 hours later, we're in crisis because Grayson's doing something. Something's happened. I'm in a situation where I've got work to think about. I've got that to think about. I've got this to think about. And all that gets thrown back at me is, well, you didn't mean what you said before, did you? So why say it? That's really difficult for me to deal with because I mean what I say. Whenever I say it, I'm not disingenuous in any way. I genuinely, when I say this is brilliant, thank you, I mean it. And similarly, when I say this is intolerable, I can't deal with this and this and this and this and this, I mean that too. Because I think we've got this situation where there are lots of support avenues for the women in relationships with children who are not neurotypical. And there are a lot of men who themselves probably bring a lot of it on by going, you just fucking get on with it, mate. You just do it. You do it, 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 and you keep bloody doing it until you stop one day. And that is, it makes that effort of going, this is just bliss, thank you. To be followed up shortly after by, well, you clearly didn't mean that, did you? But I did. It's just things have moved on. And that's really, really hard. Like tonight, for example, we thought there was a mistake and it was supposed to be last week that this was. And so we came in and we sat down and nothing happened. And it was like, right, okay, it's next week. Right, well, that's a problem because I've got a work thing I said I'd do. So I've shifted heaven and earth to do this. And there's no recognition of that. There's just a sort of general malaise of, oh, right, so you're going out after work, are you? Yeah, but, and I arrived 10 minutes late, I get it. But I did the thing that keeps me in employment alongside the thing that keeps me in a relationship. But that's just like, well, clearly you've not got your priorities right. What are the priorities there? What are we supposed to do as men? Because we get shit for whatever we do. And it does sound really fucking whiny. And apologies for the swearing, but it sounds really whiny. But I think it sounds whiny. I don't know if other people think it sounds whiny because I don't like thinking about this way about me. But it's like, I say this, you then go, well, you didn't mean that. So I go, right, okay, well, I'm not going to say that. Then it becomes, well, he never says anything nice. Then it becomes, right, okay, well, what do you do? And it becomes a kind of a cascading thing that's probably societal. It's probably part societal, part your own relationship, and part probably your own independent experiences of your own familial relationships in history, right? And I get that. But it's really, really tough being a bloke. And I don't think people realise it.
I do. I get it. I really do.
Thanks. Because it really fucking is.
It's hard. It sucks. Hang on, just lose my laptop there.
And just how many men are on this chat, for example? How many men are there? How many male partners are on this chat right now?
I don't know how many are listening. I know some listen afterwards, but you're the only one that I know is live.
Right, and there we go. But I get no fucking credit for any of that. It's just, oh, there's a work thing. Great, right. Well, here I am. Okay, brilliant, good.
Two other husbands, John. Sorry, two other husbands.
Good guys.
Excellent. Husbands, feel free to jump in because I feel like this is an important discussion. I do want to ask. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
John's wife.
John's partner.
Lindsay.
John's partner. Lindsay. I'm trying to come up with an A name. So I have a question for you. Do you mind if I do a little bit of live coaching with you guys?
Not at all.
Let me just ask,
Okay.
Lindsay, Lindsay and John, do you want me to pause recording at this point?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm fine. I'm happy.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm absolutely happy.
So Lindsay, John's brought up an important point about when he expresses good stuff, but then later on you feel like he didn't mean it. So can you tell me more about that? Why do you feel like he didn't mean it?
I feel like so our son is very behaviourally challenging, and one of his most common distress behaviours is to bite us, and we get some pretty bad bites.
Yep, I get that.
Skin, bleed, and he has 2-to-1 needs, so we can't divide and conquer. When my husband's at work, when John's at work, we have paid carers, so that there's always me and a carer, and we've all had to be trained. We've all had to be like restraint trained. We've had something called DMI training. So we have to do these physical interventions, safe holds, essentially. And it's really, really hard, and you have to work together. And for some reason, when we're dealing with those challenging situations, we just don't work well together. We blame each other, we snap at each other. And I think what I struggle with is that John can sometimes come across aggressive with me, and he can name call sometimes and get a little bit nasty with his tongue. So when he does that, I'll give you an example. Grayson was being destructive with something, and John was trying to pass it to me so that I could get it out of the way. And because I'd turned around and I tried to, you're literally just trying to firefight, and I'd turned around to straighten something else out to remove another risk from his path. And I didn't see that he was trying to pass this glass behind him to me so I could get this breakup glass out the way. And he said, get this from me. And we're in fight or flight ourselves at that moment, because he was flying at John, he was biting, he was attacking. It's hard, and you're not thinking straight. And I know he's not thinking straight, but he then said, just get this off. I said, I'm trying. He said, you're not trying anything, you lazy bitch. So straight away, when something like that is said to me, I feel attacked, I feel defensive. So he might have said to me earlier, thank you so much for doing X for me. It really, but then I've then had an insult thrown at me. So then I think, well,
okay, so it's the insult specifically.
You've undone that compliment by speaking to me in that way. That's how I feel. I feel like the good of that has been undone, it's been reversed.
All right, I get that. So if he had not used a name in that moment, you wouldn't have responded with, well, you didn't mean what you said earlier?
Yeah, quite possibly. It's the personal insults that I really struggle with, and I know he doesn't mean them. I know that they just come out in the moment.
They're also not personal.
I know, and I take them personally, and that's a real challenge that we have.
But
so
it's like,
let me just say something quickly for that, John. When you say to her that you call her a bitch or a name, that is absolutely personal, even if you don't mean it personally. But that is an absolute personal thing. But I also understand why the point that you made around giving compliments in the morning, they were relevant at the time as well.
But we have this situation where it's like everything I say is monitored very, very closely. Very closely. More close than anyone else. Whereas, like, for example, Grayson bit me once, and I said, oh, you bastard. And the first thing that Lindsay said was, don't call him a bastard. And it's not. It's like, I've stubbed my toe before now and then. Oh, you bastard. Because I've stubbed my toe. It's not about a personal, it's not directed at somebody. It's an expression of something. However, I totally agree with your point, because it is, you know, it's hard not to take things personally when they're directed directly at you. However, it's also this whole thing of, it's like, this has really helped me. Right, well, that means nothing because you said a rude name. And it's like, well, no, because I'm not the only person that calls people rude names. It wouldn't be so bad if I was.
Okay.
Because we both do that. And it's like,
so this is,
but mine
this
is
yeah.
negating and hers is stress. That sort of thing is quite difficult to deal with.
It is, and it becomes a problem. So part of the solution, and it's not an easy solution, is while you're in a calm point, is coming up with new ways of expressing your frustration. Like, so my husband, if an inanimate object doesn't do what he wants it to do, it's an F and C and it's all the things. All the things.
Is he Australian?
Yes, Australian.
There you go. But you see, but this is the thing. It's like I've had Australian friends who've called me a C all the time, and I take it as a badge of honour.
Well, that's the only time he ever says it is when he's frustrated. But
well, different Australians maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe, but it only comes out usually with inanimate objects, but occasionally when other stuff happens. And when it's been directed at the children, that's when I've been the one that's arced up about that too, because I know as a coach and someone who helps people with trauma, that goes directly into their subconscious and they're holding on to that. They believe what their perception is of what you've said. I help people to transmute and change a lot of that programming from their parents because of the way that they've treated them in their stressed and frustrated moments. Even if it wasn't on their end meant to be personal, children pick it up very personally. And I bet you, Lindsay, you've had experience of that as you were growing up, which has made you more sensitive to the way that John is. Would that be true?
Yeah, so I mean, without monopolising this whole thing, I am the daughter of an alcoholic dad and a narcissist mum.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we've been to marriage counselling. We've had quite a lot of therapy together, and yeah, that did come up. That a lot of my trauma comes into play with how I react to things.
Can I just make a suggestion, just because I'm really conscious of time and the fact that Rach's family are going to be getting up soon, because I think the fact that you are both here, you are both watching this webinar, you're both asking amazing questions. I think that is success to a degree. And you know, and the same for the other husbands that are on the call as well. The fact that you know, that shows that you're not giving up just yet, which is a brilliant sign. But I would like to suggest that maybe, if Rachel's open to that, we take this conversation offline and maybe connect you both with Rachel at another time, so that you can explore this in a little bit more detail, because I think it's going to need a bit more unpacking than 10 minutes. Rachel, is that something that we could arrange?
Yeah, absolutely. That's no problem, because there's a lot there. And there's a few things you could do to start moving back in a direction towards each other. But it's you know, it's going to take time. It's going to take bridges. It's going to take work. And if you're both still committed to the relationship working, then you've got hope. But if you've already in this space where you've decided, you know what, it's too hard, then there's no point moving forward. And that's for you guys to work out for yourselves.
Okay. Thank you, Rach. Thank you. I can see you've got somebody awake there.
That's okay. She can come sit with me. She can join me for a sec.
Okay.
I can keep going.
All right. Well, I will. Morning. I will say thank you very much, Rach, for your time and your expertise and the answers that you've given so far. I will connect you, Lindsay, with Rach, so that you and John can continue this conversation. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody for coming. It is really important. And John, there is something in the pipeline for dads through Send Gin and Cheese. So, you know,
there needs to be.
There is definitely needs to be, yeah. And I am well aware that dads need something more than there is out there at the moment. So do connect with Rachel if, you know, this is something that you want to explore further. I'll put Lindsay in touch with you, and I'll call it an end to this one this evening. So, but lots of people saying in the chat. So, all right, take care, and I will see you in the next Tips in 20, or Tips in 60 in this case.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.